Bye, baby.
Happy reviewing.
Sony RX100 Mark V. This is our 12-month review. I'm gonna break this down in where it excels and where its limitations are. Positives, the form factor. And this is such a small camera, it's the size of a phone. It's a bit fatter, of course, but size you can put in your pocket, and it's only 300 grams. So I think this is where the future lies in cameras this quality and this small. It's got this little flippy screen that I have a really bad habit of looking at. Must look at the lens when you're vlogging. Elise always tells me, look at the lens.
Look at the camera on the screen.
It's got a viewfinder and a little Johnny 5 thing on top. Another big point of this camera, the 4K footage looks beautiful. I'm really happy with the images that it produces. Some people have tried to compare this to an iPhone, but people compare everything to an iPhone. Really, it's a level above. I mean, it's got a 1-inch sensor. It's got a 24 to 70 millimeter lens. How can you compare that to a phone? That alone. And low light, there's no comparison. This camera is way better, but I still like phone cameras. So autofocus is another great thing about this camera. Sometimes it can pulse a little bit, but generally 95% of the time it's bang on the money. And we film in some challenging scenarios. I mean, when we're doing family vlogs, we got 5 people trying to get in the shot, and that'd be hard for any camera to figure out where to focus. We set the focus on wide, and we've had success with it. On this camera, there's an anti-distortion shutter, so that kind of rolling shutter that even the A6500, that has much worse rolling shutter than this, so another plus. Now, I don't shoot much in 1080. It's just not what I do because I use a gimbal when we're filming with this camera, and so I don't use the 1080p settings, but I would highly recommend using 1080p because you can use what's called intelligent active for steady shot, and that will give you some of the best image stabilization that I've seen on a camera. So yeah, would recommend. Memory recall, you can have 3 settings that you can use. We usually have one for outside with the ND filter, one for inside, low light, and one for 120 frames per second. I don't have to dive into the menu when I'm filming. I can just boom, one of those 3 settings and what I want. I can make adjustments from there, but those are usually exactly what I want. And speaking of the menu system, these little cameras are not your average point and shoot. They're quite in depth. They've got as much to learn as a DSLR. And a lot of people think that the Sony menu is harder than other systems. I would suggest, if you really want to get the most out of this camera, check out this book here. It's the Freedman Guide. Everything there is to this camera is in this book. It's descriptive and it's prescriptive. The bokeh on this camera, I mean, it's not going to be some crazy blurry background. I know some people like that. I don't. I feel like there's few occasions where you need a really blurry background, especially in a vlogging situation where you want to get the ambient area in the background. You want to make your shot beautiful, foreground and background. The slow-mo on this camera, 120 frames per second, you still get audio, and you can even bump it up to 250 frames per second, and I think it's still 1080p quality. After that, I mean, you can get 500 frames per second, even 1000 frames per second, but the quality drops dramatically. Settings, I like everything manual, and I like shooting in Cine 2. Also, you can shoot in S-Log too. If you wanted to use auto everything, it still gives you beautiful footage, so that's an option. Car alarms, the bane of a YouTuber's existence. Lastly, this might be a controversial thing for me to say, but I think the audio on this is actually quite good. I've got a lav mic for filming this, but out and about. Trying to go to Golden Temple first, then we're just gonna see what we find. What you just need to do is go into whatever editor you use add some bass and add some compression, and I find that gives me really good results. If you were to use a shotgun mic, most shotgun mics you get bad audio behind the mic, and with this there's good audio from behind and in front of the camera. Probably serve you well to put on those wind muffs too. I don't, I just try and shoot in non-windy locations, but it is a good idea. Let's talk a little bit about the limitations of this camera. I think the low light performance is not as good, of course, as a full frame camera or micro four thirds. If you're going to shoot at night, you want to have a lot of ambient light around you. Then it can be quite okay, but the less light, the more it's going to struggle. And over ISO 2000, it really struggles. As you can see in our vlog here in Kyoto, it was before sunrise, and there was just like a few lamps around, and the colors were all off and a lot of grain. Had to use a lot of ISO, and the picture suffers for it. But what do you expect with a 1-inch sensor? So if you can, film in more lit locations. Battery life, Sony is known to have pretty poor battery life. I think it's improved on the A7 III, but these and other Sony cameras, it's not great. So I would recommend having at least 3 batteries if you're gonna vlog or do some like over the day kind of shooting, filmmaking. And have one of these too. Got your battery charger in there, and this can plug into like a little power supply external charger, and you're good to go. Focal length, it may have been better with a 20mm focal length. I mean, I've got pretty long arms, so it's a bit easier for me. Where I'm at right now is probably around vlogging distance with my arm straight out, but not everyone's 6 foot. So I mean, we do alright. We can fit a family of 5 in the shot. Also, when you put it further away from you, the audio isn't as good, and you really need to speak up loud. If it had a closer focal distance, I think that would solve that problem a little bit. But on the flip side, I do like the 70mm. You can get great parallax shots. No audio input, I mean, I guess you could call that a drawback. I guess you could put an argument for it, because phones have audio inputs, but I don't know. Sony choose to keep it out of this. I wouldn't really want to put a shotgun mic on this, but I guess it would be nice to put a lav mic in it. I guess for stuff like this, I certainly wouldn't complain if they put it in on the Mark 7. The flippy screen, I mean, that's pretty dim at broad daylight. You won't be able to see it, especially if you got sunglasses on. So I guess that's a drawback. And lastly, the dynamic range. I do find the dynamic range on this camera pretty disappointing. It does limit the shots you can get. Broad daylight is not good. Even if it is overcast, the background will be blown out. So you have to be smart. If you want your shots to look good and cinematic, you're gonna have to be smart about what locations you film and when you film it, because dynamic range is not a strong point of this camera. Hi guys, I thought I looked pretty flat in that review, so I thought I'd vlog the conclusion. So would I recommend buying this camera in 2019? Yes, I would. I mean, if you understand the limitations and you're okay with them, it's a lot of camera for this tiny little thing that weighs 300 grams. My thoughts on the Mark 6, unless you really want that zoom, this is a better all-rounder. I mean, you got the wide aperture, you got the ND filter, and you got the lower price, so I think this is the better buy. Yeah, that about wraps it up. If I missed something important, let us all know in the comment section. Thanks for your time. Hit that like button and subscribe, because we're going to put out a lot more films in 2019. Okay, walk over. I think it tracked you pretty good. What do you reckon?
It tracked me when I was like around here. Yeah, here.